My DIL said, "Sell your rings. We need the money." I said, "Check your account." She wanted my jewelry. But she never expected that. I never liked gatherings at my son's house. Not because I feared noise, but because I had learned that in that place, noise often hid cruelty. Still, when Dylan and Sabrina announced a celebration dinner for their upcoming luxury nail salon, though I knew they were already $20,000 in the red, I went anyway. I have lived long enough to understand that sometimes showing up is the only thing a mother can still do. Their house was crowded with Sabrina's family, loud and perfumed with expensive colognes. They filled every chair, every corner, every moment with opinions about business, money, and success. I stood near the kitchen island, quietly refilling plates and wiping spills, invisible as dust in sunlight. My clothes were plain, a little faded, but I had worn the rings Robert gave me over the years, tiny pieces of my life that made me feel less alone. Sabrina noticed them first. Her eyes narrowed, like she had discovered a stain on her dress. "Why are you wearing those old rings?" she said, loud enough for the room to hush. "Do you want everyone to know you're stuck in another century?" She sipped wine and looked me up and down. "We're drowning in debt trying to build something real, and she's flaunting her jewelry like some useless display case." I stood still. "I have learned that stillness is sometimes the only shield left for people like me." Dylan chimed in, not even glancing my way. "Mom, you live here for free. You don't pay rent or utilities. Sabrina's right. You should help us out a little." His tone wasn't angry. It was indifferent, as if speaking about a burden, not a parent. One of Sabrina's uncles laughed. "If she were my mother, I'd have made her sell every piece already. Jewelry sitting on old hands is just wasted money." Another voice added, "Some people stay alive just to drag their families down." Their words rattled around the room, bouncing off the walls and into me like thrown stones. I did not speak, only pressed my palms together to keep them from trembling. Sabrina leaned closer, her voice sharp enough to slice the air. "You're old, you're broke, and honestly, you're lucky we let you stay here. Why keep these rings? To take them to your grave? Sell them. We're the ones with a future. You're just rot from the past." I swallowed, steadying myself. I wanted to explain, gently, that Robert had given me a ring for every milestone: our wedding, Dylan's birth, the day we paid off our house. But before the words left my mouth, Sabrina rolled her eyes and barked, "Those are cheap old stones. Stop pretending they mean anything." My voice came out softer than I intended. "They meant something to him." Sabrina slapped her hand on the table. "God, stop talking like your memories pay bills." The room snickered. Someone opened their phone to record, thinking it was all a joke. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I took a slow breath, trying not to let humiliation settle in my bones. But Sabrina was just getting warmed up. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. The sound cut through the chatter, and everyone watched as she marched straight toward me. "You know what?" she said, reaching for my hand. "Let me help you make the right choice." Before I could pull back, she grabbed my fingers one by one and ripped each ring off. The metal scraped my skin, and pain shot through my knuckles. She yanked again, and another ring came loose. My hand reddened instantly. "You don't get to hoard pretty things you don't deserve," she sneered. "These belong to someone who actually contributes around here." Dylan did nothing. He simply folded his arms and said, "Just give them to her, Mom. I'll pay you back later." There was no later. I knew that. A mother always knows. I straightened my back and let Sabrina pull the last ring free. My hand throbbed, but I lifted my chin anyway, because dignity is sometimes the only thing suffering cannot steal. Sabrina held the box of rings high, like a trophy. "Look at this," she said. "She loves these more than her own son. What an ungrateful old woman. The room erupted in laughter. I looked at her not with anger, not with fear, but with the calm that comes when you finally see someone clearly. My voice was quiet, but the quiet made her freeze. "If you want them," I said, "then take them." Her smile returned, triumphant. I added, almost gently, "But before you do anything else, check your account." She blinked, confused, then scoffed. "What? You transfer me $50? Please." The room laughed again. I didn't, because I knew exactly what she would find. I knew exactly what would happen next, and it would be nothing like what she imagined. She strutted back to her seat, clutching the rings as if she had already won. But the night wasn't over. Not even close. The morning before the dinner, I went to the grocery store to buy a few basic things: eggs, a loaf of bread, and tea bags. My list was short because I rarely bought more than I needed. When I swiped my card at the register, the screen blinked once, then again, and the cashier frowned. "It's been declined," she said softly, as if trying not to embarrass me. I felt my stomach tighten. "Could you try again?" I asked. She did. Same result. She told me my account had dropped below $500. I stood there for a moment, unable to move. That account held $75,000, the FEMA relief money I had never touched because I wanted it safe for emergencies. I thanked the cashier, left the groceries behind, and drove home with hands trembling on the steering wheel. Once inside my room, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank, and stared at the numbers as if they belonged to someone else. $75,000. Gone. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the transactions. There were charges for expensive furniture from a boutique I had never entered. Thousands spent at a salon equipment supplier. A large deposit paid to the landlord of the nail salon space Dylan and Sabrina bragged about. And then one transaction made my breath catch: a high-end jewelry store, several $1,000s in one purchase. All the charges were made with my physical card, with correct PIN authentication. I leaned back slowly. My card never left my wallet, except when I used it. Except the times Sabrina insisted on helping me find my bag. Or when she said, "Let me carry your purse upstairs, you'll drop it with those shaky hands." I remembered watching her walk ahead of me with my handbag swinging from her wrist. I remembered the way she sometimes disappeared into the bathroom with it when she thought I wasn't looking. Suddenly, the missing money wasn't a mystery at all. It was a pattern. I called the bank, forcing my voice to stay steady. The representative confirmed everything. The card had been used in person, with chip and PIN. "Are you sure no one else has access to your card?" she asked gently. Sometimes older clients forget who they've given things to. Shame pricked at my skin. I hated how easily people assumed confusion in old age. "No," I said firmly. "I did not give my card to anyone." Her tone softened further, too gentle, almost pitying. "It happens," she murmured. "Memory gets slippery." Something inside me recoiled. I thanked her and hung up, sitting for a long moment with the silence pressing against me like weight. I needed to confront Sabrina, but I knew better than to accuse her directly. People like her don't crumble under accusation. They sharpen. So I walked into the living room where she was painting her nails with an air of victory, and I said, "Honey, have you ever used my card by accident? Maybe picked up my wallet thinking it was yours?" My tone was soft, cautious, giving her space to explain without shame. She didn't take it. She shot upright like a firecracker. "Are you accusing me of stealing?" Her voice was so loud, Dylan immediately appeared from the hallway. She glared at me, eyes blazing. "You probably don't even remember where you put half your things. Don't drag me into your senile confusion." The word senile slapped me harder than any physical blow could. I opened my mouth to speak, but Dylan cut in instantly. "Mom, come on," he said, rubbing his temples. "You've been forgetting stuff a lot lately. Don't blame Sabrina for your memory issues." His voice held a weariness, a tone that said he had already chosen a side, and it was never mine. Sabrina folded her arms, triumphant. "She's losing it, Dylan," she said. "Next thing we know, she'll be accusing us of taking her dentures." They laughed. At me. In my own home. And for one terrifying moment, I wondered if they were right. Had I simply imagined handing over my purse? Had I forgotten something important? That flicker of doubt was the cruelest part. Gaslighting works best when you already fear your age creeping in. I excused myself quietly, walking back to my room with a calmness I did not feel. Once inside, I closed the door and locked it, my hands finally shaking freely now that no one could see. I knew Sabrina had taken the money. I knew Dylan would never believe me, and I knew exactly what would happen if I reported it now. The same tone from the bank, the same pitying eyes, the same subtle dismissal. Old people misremember things. That is what the world believes. So I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. That night, I moved the remaining balance from my account into a smaller backup account I had kept hidden since Robert died. I changed the PIN, and then I activated text alerts for every single transaction. I dug out a thin notepad from my drawer and wrote the date on the first page. Then I recorded everything I'd seen: times, amounts, locations, the bank representative's comments, and Sabrina's reaction. My handwriting shook, but every word deepened my resolve. I was done being confused, done being dismissed, done being the soft backboard for their anger. I wasn't ready to fight back yet, but I was ready to watch, to wait, to gather every thread until the truth had no place left to hide. In that quiet, with the house finally asleep, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. After discovering the missing money, I could barely sleep. My thoughts kept circling the same orbit. Sabrina's voice, Dylan's dismissive tone, the bank's sterile sympathy. But there was one place that still held a sense of clarity for me. One place untouched by the chaos of the present. The little jewelry shop where Robert had bought my rings. The memory of it drifted forward. Gentle, but insistent. Robert used to take me there on nights when he wanted to surprise me. The shop was old-fashioned, the kind with creaking wooden floors and glass cases that reflected warm yellow light instead of cold fluorescent glare. The owner, Mr. Leland, was one of those men who treated jewelry not as luxury, but as legacy. Robert trusted him. He once said with a soft laugh, "If anything ever happens and I'm not around, go to Leland. He knows the stories behind these better than anyone else." I used to smile at the thought, never imagining that someday I'd walk into that shop without Robert's hand in mine. The day after Sabrina accused me of losing my mind, I drove there. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped inside, and Mr. Leland looked up from behind the counter. For a second, he squinted, and then his face warmed into recognition. Before I could tell him why I'd come, he said something that tightened the air around us. "This happened about a month before the dinner. Candace? Well, I'll be damned. It's been years. I'd know those eyes anywhere." His kindness almost undid me. I swallowed the tightness in my chest and managed a smile. He guided me to the counter, studying my face. "Everything all right, dear?" he asked. Before I answered him, he added something quietly. "You know, this isn't the first time someone brought rings like yours here. It happened about a month before today." Something in his voice told me he already knew the answer was no. I explained quietly, showing him the empty spaces on my fingers where my rings used to be. I told him they'd been taken, but not stolen, at least not in a way a sheriff could understand. He nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion. Then he said something that made the air still around us. "You know, a young woman came in here last month with a set of rings that looked exactly like yours. That was 1 month before the dinner. The same month everything in this house started feeling wrong. Same engraving on the inside, same wear marks on the band. She said her mother-in-law wouldn't notice if the stones were replaced with something bigger. She even laughed about it." My pulse thudded in my ears. "A young woman?" I asked. Though I already knew. My heart tightened, because at that moment I knew Sabrina's greed hadn't begun at the dinner. It had been circling me like a shadow long before. He nodded gravely. Dark hair. Sharp tongue. Called you old. Said you probably wouldn't know the difference between a real stone and crushed glass. He motioned toward a computer screen. We didn't do the work. Something about her rubbed me wrong. So we kept the footage. My heart stilled, because suddenly the timeline clicked into place. It all happened a month before the dinner, long before Sabrina ripped the rings from my fingers. When he pulled up the video, my heart clenched. There she was, Sabrina leaning against the counter like she owned the world. She tapped her glossy nails on the glass case, laughing as she said, "Trust me, she's ancient. She won't notice if I upgrade. She lives in the past." I had heard insults, cruelty, accusations, but seeing her speak so casually, so confidently, as if my ignorance were a fact carved into stone, hurt in a different, deeper way. It wasn't just disrespect. It was a certainty. She truly believed I was too old, too dull, too slow to understand anything. Mr. Leland watched my expression soften into something tired. "I'm sorry, Candace," he murmured. "I didn't want to call trouble on the girl without knowing the full story." "You didn't bring trouble," I said quietly. "She did." He folded his arms decisively. "If she comes again, I'll call you right away." That small act, someone believing me without hesitation, felt like a warm quilt thrown over my coldest memories. For the first time in days, I felt seen. Then he asked, "What do you want to do now?" The answer rose in me, not like anger, but like resolve. I explained my idea carefully, step by step. He listened, nodding. And by the time I finished, his smile had turned sharp with admiration. "Smart woman," he said. "Robert always said you had more fire in you than you let on." We spent the next hour working through details. I gave him the rings. I still had the ones Sabrina hadn't laid her hands on yet, and he placed them in a velvet pouch with a gentleness that reminded me of Robert. He locked them inside the shop's safe temporarily while preparing paperwork for a safety deposit transfer. Then he helped me choose identical settings and matching band designs. Not diamonds this time, cubic zirconia, sparkling, convincing, and utterly worthless. The plan wasn't revenge. It was protection. Just as Robert had meant the rings to be, the next afternoon, I took the genuine rings to the bank and secured them in a long, narrow box lined with blue felt. I signed the forms carefully, my name shaky but determined. When I walked out, the weight on my chest felt lighter than it had in years. No one would touch those rings again. Not Sabrina. Not anyone. That night, in the quiet of my bedroom, I slipped the imitation rings onto my fingers one by one. They gleamed just enough to fool a greedy eye, but held none of the warmth of the originals. I looked at my reflection in the small mirror above my dresser. Same hands, same lines, different strengths. For the first time, when I thought of Sabrina, I didn't feel fear or sorrow. I felt clarity. She hadn't just taken my money. She had tried to erase the last pieces of the life Robert and I built, and she had believed she would get away with it because I was old, because I was quiet, because she thought I would never fight back. But she didn't know me. Not really. I went to bed early, preparing for dinner the next day, and as I pulled the blanket over myself, I realized something important. Sabrina thought she'd stolen from me, but she had stolen from a ghost. And ghosts know how to haunt. I did not see Sabrina the morning after the party, but I heard her long before she ever stepped into the kitchen. Her voice carried down the hallway like the shriek of a knife dragged along a plate. I was buttering toast when she put her phone on speaker and practically sang to her friend. "Jenna, I swear the old woman has no clue what these rings are worth. She probably thinks they're some sentimental junk. I'm taking them to sell today. Finally. Something good is happening for us." Her friend squealed with the kind of excitement that only comes from two people who enable each other's worst impulses. I heard Sabrina continue, "We need the money. Dylan is stressed, and honestly, I'm the only adult in this house. I'm doing everyone a favor." I waited for Dylan to correct her. He didn't. Instead, his voice floated down the hall, steady and approving. "Yeah, babe. Sell them. We need the cash fast." Mom won't even notice. She barely looks at her bank statements. She won't remember what she spent last week. My hands tightened around the knife. It wasn't surprise. It was clarity. People like them didn't stumble into cruelty. They walked into it willingly, believing they were entitled to whatever they could grab without being caught. Around noon, Sabrina strutted out wearing her nicest coat, makeup bright, expression smug. She clutched the ring box like a prize she'd earned. She didn't look at me when she passed the table. "Going out," she announced. Dylan added, "Good luck, babe. Hope they offer a lot." They walked out laughing, full of confidence that the world owed them everything. I knew exactly which store she was heading to. What she didn't know was that I had already been there before her. Mr. Leland's jewelry shop was a small, old building with creaky floors and warm lighting, the place where my late husband bought every ring he ever gave me. Robert trusted that man, and so did I. The night before the party, I had visited him and explained everything. So when Sabrina pushed through his door, she walked straight into a trap she didn't even realize existed. She entered like she owned the place. Mr. Leland later told me she didn't bother with a greeting. She dropped the rings onto the counter with a flourish and said, "These are real antique pieces. My mother-in-law had them for decades. Don't try any tricks. I know they're worth a lot." She tapped her long nails on the glass as he arranged the rings under the inspection light. He examined the first one, then the second, then the third. Each time, he saw the same thing: cheap plating, imitation stones, settings with zero value. He checked with every tool out of professional courtesy, even though the truth was already obvious. When he finally looked up, he removed his glasses slowly, with the calm pity of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Ma'am," he said, "these rings are fake. Every single one of them." Sabrina reacted like he had slapped her. "Fake? No. No, that's impossible. The old hag tricked me. She's been wearing these forever." Her voice bounced around the shop so loudly that several customers turned to look. Mr. Leland rested his hands on the counter and spoke gently, but firmly. "Your mother-in-law didn't trick you. These aren't her original rings. And we know that because you brought the real ones here last month." Her mouth fell open. I never, what are you talking about?" "We have security recordings," he continued. "We record every appraisal. You came in asking us to replace the diamonds with larger ones. You said your mother-in-law was old and wouldn't notice." He clicked a mouse, and the screen lit up. Watching her on that screen felt like watching a stranger sharpen a knife behind my back. There she was, Sabrina perfectly framed under the shop's camera, smiling, laughing, waving her hand dismissively as she said, "She'll never know. Trust me." Gasps rippled through the other customers. One whispered, "She tried to swap the stones?" Another muttered, "And she stole from an old woman?" Their judgment was instant and merciless. Sabrina's face was drained of color. She reached out to grab the rings, but Mr. Leland placed a steady hand over the box. "I'm afraid you can't take those," he said calmly. "They're worthless copies. And for your information, when you came in last month, we contacted Candace immediately. Her husband asked us years ago to protect anything belonging to her. She knew everything long before today." It hit her like a punch to the throat. Sabrina stammered. She set me up." "No," Mr. Leland replied. "You set yourself up. She simply stopped letting you steal." The humiliation was total. Customers stared at her like she was something rotten. No amount of makeup or fancy coats could shield her from the truth burning across her face. When she stumbled out of the shop, shaking with anger, she finally understood the reality she had refused to see. She had never taken anything from me at all. She had walked willingly, eagerly, into a trap built entirely from her own greed. Sabrina didn't come home until late afternoon, and when she finally slammed the door open, the sound rattled every picture frame in the hallway. I was sitting at the dining table peeling an orange when she stormed past me, face blotched from crying, mascara streaked into lines that made her look carved rather than painted. She didn't speak to me. She only grabbed her phone, and dialed Dylan with trembling fingers. The moment he answered, she shrieked. She gave me fake rings. Fake! She humiliated me. I'll sue her. Her voice cracked so loudly I could hear Dylan pull the phone away from his ear. He tried calming her down, repeating, "Babe, slow down, slow down." But she spiraled deeper into her hysteria, ranting about how that old hag ruined her life and how everyone in the jewelry store had laughed at her. She kept screaming until she was out of breath, and only then did she choke out, "Come home. Now." 20 minutes later, Dylan burst through the door like a man preparing for battle. He didn't remove his shoes, didn't even glance at me. He went straight to Sabrina and wrapped an arm around her, whispering as she cried dramatically into his shirt. Then he turned toward me with a glare that held nothing but resentment. "Mom," he said sharply, "Sabrina told me everything. You gave her fake rings. You embarrassed her in public. What is wrong with you?" I folded another piece of orange into my mouth, chewed slowly, swallowed, and then met his stare with calm I hadn't felt in years. "Sit down," I said. "Both of you." They didn't want to obey, but something in my tone, quiet, level, unshakable, pulled them into chairs like gravity. Sabrina sniffed loudly and crossed her arms. Dylan leaned back, jaw tight. I began. "Sabrina took the rings. I didn't stop her. She told me she needed money. I let her take what she thought she wanted." Sabrina scoffed loudly. "You let me steal fake jewelry? How generous," Dylan muttered. "Mom, seriously." I held up a hand. "Do you remember what I told her at the party? The last thing I said before she ran off with those rings?" They exchanged confused glances. I repeated it slowly. "Check your account." Sabrina froze. Dylan did too. I nodded toward her phone. "Go on. Open your banking app." The confidence returned to her face immediately. She whipped out her phone with a smirk, tapping aggressively until the screen loaded. Then her smirk widened into a triumphant grin. "Well, well, well," she said, leaning back smugly. "Looks like the old woman slipped up. There's a $75,000 deposit here. Says for the rings. You must have transferred it to me by mistake." She laughed, loud and cruel. "You just gave me all the money you had left." I folded my hands neatly in my lap. "No, Sabrina, I didn't give you anything." She blinked. Confusion flickered. I spoke slowly, clearly. "That $75,000 is not money I gave you. It's not a gift. It's not generosity. It's not a mistake." I leaned forward slightly. "It is the exact amount you stole from me." Her face drained. "What?" Dylan snapped. "Mom, what are you talking about? She didn't steal from you. You probably forgot." "No," I said firmly. I did not forget. I discovered every transaction. The furniture, the nail salon deposit, the jewelry store charges, the luxury purchases you hid. $75,000 of it, and every dollar was charged using my card. Sabrina's mouth hung open, but no words came out. I spoke with the bank. I continued. They verified the card was used in person. Chip and pin. Sabrina swallowed. Dylan shifted uncomfortably. And the bank confirmed something else. I added. Elder fraud cases are handled very seriously. Sabrina's chair creaked as she stiffened. I explained. When I realized you had taken the money and would lie about it, I didn't report you immediately, not because I was afraid of you, because I knew neither of you would believe me, and I knew you'd twist it into, Mom, forgot. My voice softened only slightly. So, I waited. I let you take what you wanted. I kept every receipt, every statement, every discrepancy. I lifted my gaze towards Sabrina, and then yesterday, I asked the bank to transfer the entire total of unauthorized charges back to the account of the person who benefited. I paused. You, Sabrina's jaw trembled. You can't do that. You can't just... Oh, but the bank can, I said. They labeled it as a refund correction for fraudulent transactions. And they also froze the original investigation so that the final beneficiary of the stolen funds is now clearly identified. At that exact moment, Sabrina's phone buzzed violently on the table. She flinched. "Read it," I said. She picked it up with shaking fingers. Her eyes widened with each line. She whispered, "No, no, no." Dylan grabbed the phone and read aloud, voice cracking. "Your account is under review by the Elder Fraud and Financial Abuse Division. Case forwarded to Adult Protective Services. Please prepare documentation." Silence swallowed the room. Sabrina looked at me, pale as wax. "You set me up." I shook my head. "No, you set yourself up. I simply put the evidence where it belonged." Dylan whispered, "Mom, what did you do?" I looked at my son, my foolish, blind son, and said quietly, "What I should have done years ago. I stopped letting you hurt me." And just like that, the house felt different. Not lighter, not safer, but finally honest. 2 days after the bank froze Sabrina's account, I heard the knock that changed the tone of a house. Not loud, not threatening official. When I opened the door, 2 officers stood beside a neatly dressed woman carrying a folder marked Adult Protective Services. The woman smiled kindly. "Mrs. Candace Butler? We're here to follow up on the Elder Financial Abuse report from your bank." I nodded and stepped aside, letting them in. The officers remained near the doorway, while the APS representative sat across from me at the dining table, her hands folded calmly. She explained my rights slowly, clearly, respectfully, as if she already understood the exhaustion heavy in my bones. "You're protected under elder law," she said. "What happened to you is a criminal offense. We're here to help you decide what steps you want to take." I listened quietly. Then I told her I wanted to move forward. "Not out of revenge," I said softly, "but because if they did this to me, they will do it again, to someone else who won't see it coming." She nodded, understanding perfectly. When the officers asked me to recount the events, I spoke plainly. No theatrics, no anger, just truth slow and steady like water wearing down stone. They wrote everything down. They took screenshots of my banking alerts, photographed my statements, and recorded my explanation of how Sabrina accessed my card. When they finished, one of them said gently, "We'll need to speak with them too." I gestured toward the other end of the house. "They're in the living room." What followed was not a conversation so much as an unraveling. The officers approached Sabrina and Dylan where they sat on the couch. Sabrina rigid with fear, Dylan pale and sweating. The APS representative explained that they were under investigation for elder financial exploitation, a felony in our state. Sabrina blinked rapidly, gripping her knees. "Exploitation? This is just a misunderstanding. We're family. The family borrows." The officer shook his head calmly. "Ma'am, the law doesn't define theft as borrowing. You used her card without permission. That's a crime." Dylan tried to step forward, hands raised. "We didn't mean any harm. Mom's okay. She's fine. This is all blown out of proportion." The officer cut him off. "Sir, you benefited from the funds. That makes you part of the investigation." Dylan's mouth clamped shut. For the first time since he was a boy, he had no words that could shield him. Within hours, the effects rippled outward. Their joint bank account was officially frozen pending review. Sabrina received a fraud risk designation, meaning no major bank would open a new line of credit for her anytime soon. Dylan's employer, an insurance firm that prided itself on integrity, was notified of the investigation after verifying employment records connected to the case. The next morning, Dylan came home with a box of belongings and empty eyes. "They suspended me," he muttered. "They want me to step away until the matter is resolved." A day later, he was fired. But the fallout didn't end there. News travels fast in families like Sabrina's families that care more about appearance than truth. Her parents arrived in a rush, demanding answers. When they learned what she had done, her mother pressed a hand to her forehead and whispered, "You humiliated us. How could you be so stupid?" Her father wasn't as soft. "Who will trust our family now? Who will trust you? Even your cousins won't lend you money for an attorney." He refused to help her pay for legal counsel. "Fix your own mess," he said coldly before walking out. After her parents left, Dylan lashed out. "You destroyed everything. If you hadn't touched her card, if you hadn't grabbed those stupid rings." Sabrina snapped back, voice shrill with panic. "If your mother hadn't been a stingy old witch, I wouldn't have had to do anything. She created this." Dylan pointed at her, as though she were a stain he was trying to scrub away. "No. You did this. You and your greed. You pulled me into this. You ruined our life," Sabrina screamed. "You were the one who told me to sell the rings. You said we needed the money. You used every dollar I took, and now you blame me?" Their voices rose, louder and louder, spiraling into the kind of argument that breaks something permanent inside a marriage. When Dylan shouted, "Maybe we should separate," the room went silent, except for Sabrina's ragged breathing. I stood in the hallway listening, not out of pleasure, but out of a long, painful recognition. The world they built on entitlement, blame, and convenience was collapsing, and they didn't know how to stand without leaning on someone else. The APS representative returned the next day with forms for me to sign. She spoke to me with a gentleness I had rarely been offered in my life. "You've done the right thing," she said. "They can't hurt you now." I nodded and signed each page carefully. I didn't gloat, didn't scold, didn't offer a single word of triumph. I didn't need to. Reality was already teaching them more thoroughly than I ever could. By the end of the week, the house was quiet again, not peaceful, but emptied. Dylan stayed with a friend. Sabrina stayed with her sister. Their marriage hung in the balance, their finances in shreds, their reputations damaged in ways that would echo for years. And I simply folded laundry and watered my plants. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives dressed in paperwork and calm voices, teaching lessons no amount of yelling could ever deliver. Here, in the silence of my kitchen, I felt for the first time in a long while safe. I moved out 3 weeks after the investigation began. Not because anyone forced me, but because I had finally allowed myself to imagine a life where I could breathe without waiting for footsteps in the hallway or accusations thrown like stones. I found a small 1-bedroom apartment on the quieter side of town, 3 blocks from the library and across the street from a bakery that still made biscuits the old way. It was clean, bright, and simple, exactly the kind of space where a 73-year-old woman could start over without carrying the weight of someone else's cruelty. The first night I slept there, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, quiet that wasn't filled with fear. I unpacked slowly, placing my folded clothes into drawers, stacking dishes in cabinets, arranging my knitting needles beside my chair. On the second shelf of the closet, I set down a small velvet pouch, the backup, the placeholder for what mattered most. The real rings, the rings Robert had given me through a lifetime of small triumphs and hard sacrifices, were still locked inside the safety deposit box at the bank. I kept them there on purpose. Every Sunday, I visited the box, held one ring in my hand, polished it gently, remembered the man who had loved me without conditions, and then returned it to the secure drawer before leaving. It was my way of telling the universe that although people had tried to take from me, I still owned something no one could steal: my history. Word about what happened to me spread through the community faster than I expected. Women from church stopped by with casseroles and flowers. A few neighbors left notes on my door saying things like, "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself." An older group of women invited me to join a support circle for seniors who had experienced financial or emotional abuse. I listened to their stories, some heartbreaking, some infuriating, and realized that none of us were weak. We were tired, yes, worn down, yes, but never weak. There is a difference. I thought that chapter might close quietly, but life has a way of offering one last test before letting you rest. It came one afternoon as I was watering my small row of potted lavender outside my apartment door. I heard footsteps on the sidewalk, heavy, dragging, hesitant. When I turned, Dylan was standing at the bottom of the steps. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes were hollow. He looked older than his 32 years, as though the consequences of his choices had hurried time along. "Mom," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "can we talk?" I stayed where I was, the watering can suspended midair. "What is it, Dylan?" He took a shaky breath. "I lost my job. We had to give up the house. Sabrina left. She's living with her sister now." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I don't know what to do. I don't have anywhere else to go. Please, can I stay with you? Just until I get back on my feet." For a long moment, I studied him, not the man he wanted to be seen as, but the man he truly was. My son, my boy, my heartbreak. And yet, also the same person who had watched Sabrina rip the rings from my fingers and said nothing. The same person who let me be humiliated in my own home. The same person who spent what little I had without guilt. "Dylan," I said softly, "the day you stood there and let your wife pull those rings off my hands, you walked out of my life long before you moved out of the house." He winced, as if the truth itself stung. "I know," he whispered, "and I'm sorry. Mom, I really am." I believed him, in the way you believe someone who regrets the consequences but may not yet understand the harm. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a deep, tired ache, the kind that comes from loving someone who never learned how to love you back. I stepped closer, but not close enough to touch him. "I raised you, Dylan. For too long, I raised you even after you were grown. But it's time you raise yourself now. It's time you stand on your own legs, not mine." His eyes filled with despair. "So you're not letting me in?" I shook my head. "No, not today. Not like this." He nodded slowly, breaking a little more with each second, then turned and walked down the sidewalk without another word. I watched until he disappeared around the corner. I didn't cry. Grief feels different when it's old. It settles instead of spilling. Inside, my apartment felt warm, safe, mine. I put the kettle on, letting the steam fog the small kitchen window. Then I opened the velvet pouch on the counter and removed the ring I had polished that morning. Under the soft yellow light, the stone glimmered like a memory refusing to dim. I placed it beside a framed photo of Robert, the one where he was laughing at something I had said, the one where his eyes shone with that quiet certainty I had fallen in love with. "Do you see?" I whispered, touching the ring gently. "I kept them, all of them. And I kept myself too. My heart, my dignity, my boundary. They didn't take any of it." Outside, the evening settled. Inside, the kettle whistled. Sabrina wanted my rings, wanted my money, wanted everything she could pry from my hands, but the one thing she could never take, and the one thing I reclaimed, was my life. As I sit here now, watching the steam rise from my tea, and feeling the quiet settle around me like an old, familiar blanket, I'm reminded of something life took me far too long to learn. Peace isn't what people hand you. Peace is what you choose when you finally stop letting the wrong people write your story. I kept my rings. I kept my dignity. But most importantly, I kept myself. If my story reminded you of your own strength, or of the strength of a woman you love, I'd be grateful if you stayed a little longer on this porch with me. Go on and tap that subscribe button for Grandma True Stories, sweetheart. Every click helps these stories travel a little farther, reach someone who needs to hear that they are not alone, and keep the voices of women like us alive. Thank you for listening. Come back soon. I have plenty more truth to tell. Elsa poured more tea, humming softly as she moved, and I felt something gentle settle inside me, a quiet certainty that I had finally closed the door on a past that no longer deserved to follow me. I chose kindness. I chose dignity. I chose myself. And this time, I was not choosing alone. And that, my dear listeners, is how an old woman finally closed the door on a past that had weighed on her shoulders for far too long. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth, dignity, and the quiet courage to walk forward without looking back. Life has a way of testing us, especially in our later years, but it also has a way of sending unexpected kindness when we think we have run out of light. Elsa's footsteps in my kitchen, the warmth of tea shared between two broken hearts. Learning to mend those are the blessings I carry now. Not the cruelty, not the humiliation, not the boy who forgot who raised him. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own strength or the strength of someone you love, I would be grateful if you stayed a while longer with me. Tap that subscribe button to join our porch, our little corner of the world here at Grand MA True Stories. Your support helps keep these memories alive, helps carry these lessons forward, and reminds every quiet soul out there that they are not alone. Thank you for listening, sweetheart. I will come back soon. I have more stories to tell.